I was Henry's canary for many years until his Moonlight returned to the country. I sensibly packed my bags, sold everything in the villa that could be sold, and gracefully ended our contract unilaterally. Who knew that young Master Henry, who usually hated my chatter, would be so petty? He gritted his teeth and held me tightly, saying, "Took the money and ran, huh? Were you a thief in a past life?" I cried, "You're not going to make me pay it back, are you?" I was Henry's canary for many years, obedient enough to be kept at home, until I heard his Moonlight was returning. I knew this blissful life of idleness was finally coming to an end. In front of me, Henry didn't mention a word about it, just like always. I understood him after all. To him, I was just a plaything. Did he need to discuss his decisions with a plaything? Seeing me lost in thought, Henry paused his embrace and kiss. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about the best way to leave that would maximize my benefits," I thought. But naturally, I couldn't say that to him. I blinked my watery eyes. "Maybe I didn't rest well last night." He gently touched my hair, speaking softly, "Can't handle it anymore. That's not like you." I knew he always valued this kind of experience. I replied softly, "Then be gentle with me in the future." He didn't respond. Tonight, I might be back a bit late. I knew tonight was the night his Moonlight was returning. He was eager to meet his beloved, leaving no time for me. I lowered my eyes and nodded obediently. Okay. He liked me to be as obedient as a little rabbit, so I nestled into his embrace. "Let me know before you come back. I always want to look my best in front of you." If I was halfway through packing when he returned, it would be troublesome. His voice returned to normal. "Okay." As soon as the time came, Henry left. As usual, I stood at the door, reluctantly saying goodbye. Once his figure disappeared from view, my reluctant expression vanished. I quickly scanned the villa. He was off to be with his beloved, and as his canary, it was only sensible to pack up and end our contract unilaterally. I contacted a second-hand dealer online, and within minutes, a truck appeared at the villa's door. The dealer was bewildered by the pile of high-end goods. "Miss, are you sure you want to sell all this?" I nodded firmly. "Take everything you can. The price?" I smiled. "No problem. Just pay me all at once." My current strategy was quick, precise, and ruthless. I sold everything in the villa that could be sold. Seeing the extra zeros in my account, I finally felt a sense of security. Indeed, only money can provide true security. Men are fleeting clouds. Watching the familiar villa become empty, a part of my heart felt hollow, but I ignored the strange feeling. I quickly booked a flight to leave immediately and packed my bags. Looking at the villa, now just a few empty walls, I smirked. This time, I was truly ending my life as a canary. Goodbye, Henry. Never again. Ha 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 ha. Free at last, I was ready to start my happy single life with the money. Driving luxury cars, living in a single apartment. My daily joy was wandering through malls and entertainment venues. Life was simply too wonderful. Wearing a mini skirt and beautiful makeup, I followed my friends to a nightclub. This kind of outfit was something Henry never liked, so I always suppressed myself. My friends were surprised to see me. "I remember when I first met you, your style wasn't like this. Why the sudden change?" I looked at her confidently. I just felt the previous style was a bit dull. Sometimes you need a change to refresh your mood. Most of the time before, I was catering to Henry's preferences. Now, I dress however I want. My friend nodded in agreement. "Makes sense." Then hesitantly added, "I heard when someone suddenly changes their style, it's often because of a heartbreak." "Did you?" I shook my head. "Who says I can't change my style based on my mood?" In Henry's eyes, I was just a plaything. He's probably enjoying life with his beloved now. Why should I change because of someone who doesn't have me in their heart? My friend opened her mouth but found nothing to say and chose silence. Even though I answered confidently, deep down, there was a slight ache in my heart. I ignored that strange feeling and fully immersed myself in my carefree life. People should enjoy life while they can. The flashing lights on the dance floor amplified my playful mood. I pulled my friend onto the stage to dance. As soon as I got up there, a handsome guy with a sunny smile asked, "Hey beautiful, are you alone?" Seeing the handsome guy, my first reaction was to avoid, but then I remembered I'm single now. Why avoid men? I nodded confidently. The handsome guy was happy. "If you don't mind, let's dance together." Well, I was having a great time, chatting freely with my best friend. Now I finally don't have to live up to others' expectations all the time. I can go back whenever I want and do whatever I please. Maybe I was having too much fun because I didn't even notice my phone buzzing with messages from Henry. It wasn't until everything wound down that I realized Henry had sent me dozens of texts. What happened at Ethan's place? Did it get robbed? "Ethan, where have you gone? Why aren't you back yet?" I called, but you didn't answer. "Where are you? I'll come pick you up. Reply quickly, don't make me come find you." Just reading the messages, I could already picture his frustrated expression. I was quite annoyed at that moment. He was already with Moonlight, and yet he still had time to meddle in my affairs. Was he really trying to juggle two relationships? Although I initially agreed to be his canary, I have my limits. I refuse to be the third wheel, so I completely ignored Henry and blocked him. During this time, I let out all the pent-up emotions from the past few years and fully enjoyed the life of a wealthy woman. After living in indulgence, I knew that even though I had a substantial amount of money, it would eventually run out if I didn't find a way to earn more. Luckily, while I was with Henry, I had improved myself by learning a lot about business investments and had even earned several certifications. Previously, it was all theoretical, but now the opportunity had come. I divided my funds into 3 parts, one for savings, one for living expenses, and the last for investing in a project of a new computer industry that Henry had been particularly optimistic about. When I was with Henry, I saw him praise this company several times. It turned out my decision was right. After half a year, my initial investment had multiplied several times. Despite living extravagantly, my bank balance kept increasing, and I felt delighted. In retrospect, I owe a lot to Henry. If I hadn't met him, I wouldn't have learned so much useful knowledge, and it was because of him that I invested in that company accurately. My family background wasn't particularly good. When I got into that school, Henry, as an investor, sponsored my education. Back then, I studied diligently to ensure his investment wasn't wasted. Besides studying hard, I tried to become someone he liked to please, this so-called benefactor. I cautiously accepted his support and smoothly completed my 4 years of college. After graduation, Henry suddenly asked if I wanted to stay by his side. At that time, I was quite taken aback. I genuinely felt that this man who had supported me was wonderful. To be honest, Henry ticked all my boxes in terms of aesthetics. The moment he asked, I couldn't resist and nodded in agreement. After becoming Henry's canary, I found that he treated me exceptionally well, not only financially but also emotionally. He would carefully protect my dignity in front of others, trying to extend my time by his side. To maintain the appearance Henry liked, I put a lot of effort into my looks and self-improvement. Besides eating 3 meals at regular times, I was very particular about what I ate. After 5 p.m., I wouldn't eat anything except drink water. Even if friends invited me out and urged me to indulge a little with a cup of tea, I would firmly stick to my principles. In those years with Henry, I could count on one hand the times I drank tea or ate high-calorie foods. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'd be so hungry that even reading about long-legged creatures in articles would make my mouth water. Perhaps this is one of the reasons why I indulged so much after gaining freedom. 3 years later, I had made a name for myself in the investment world, earning the nickname Snow King. This nickname came from the fact that any stock I invested in would invariably rise, like a snowball growing larger and larger. Once the stock price started to rise, it would attract more buyers, pushing the price up and creating a positive cycle. As my reputation in the industry grew, I received an invitation to a domestic auction. I was quite reluctant to return to my home country and initially planned to decline. But then I saw a familiar necklace on the auction list. It was a green emerald necklace that Henry had given me, which I had sold. Seeing that necklace, I felt as if something had grabbed my heart tightly, making it hard to breathe. Almost as if possessed, I accepted the invitation. 3 years later, I set foot on my homeland again. To say I wasn't excited would be a lie. 3 years ago, I fled as a discarded canary. Now I returned as a successful investor. In hindsight, it's quite an inspiring story. While abroad, I also participated in. When I arrived at the auction, I was quite relaxed. I thought I would just attend this auction and then return to where I came from. But I never expected the world to be so small. At the auction, I saw a familiar figure. The moment I saw Henry's back, I almost doubted my eyes. Wasn't he always uninterested in such events? Why was he suddenly at the auction? And why did he come alone? Where was his moonlight? Before I could think further, I gasped and hid behind a large pillar like a clumsy thief. I was so unlucky. I had just returned to the country and ran into him. Back then, I left in such a way and cleared out his house. If he caught me, I shivered at the thought and decided to sneak away before Henry noticed me. As I was cautiously retreating to the door, the host on stage suddenly spoke. "We are very fortunate to have the rising star in the investment world, Miss Ethan, with us today. Let's give her a warm welcome." The introduction was fine, but then the spotlight hit me. I forced a smile and awkwardly stopped my escape. "Hello, everyone, I am." Before I could finish, I turned and ran while everyone was distracted. The guests were stunned, and after a brief pause, Henry's eyebrows furrowed. He stood up abruptly and, ignoring everyone's gaze, rushed towards me, even shouting my name. "Ethan!" I didn't dare respond, feeling my heart skip a beat. Seeing him rushing over, I panicked even more and ran faster. As I fled awkwardly, I couldn't help but complain internally. It was wrong of me to sell his things and run away with the money, but since when did young Master Henry care so much about those small assets? He was always so generous when we were together. Why did he suddenly become stingy? Luckily, I quickly reached the roadside, hailed a taxi, and barely escaped Henry's pursuit. Through the rearview mirror, I saw him standing there, looking frustrated. Back home, lying in bed, I recalled the look in Henry's eyes as he chased the car. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed off. Why did it feel like his eyes were filled with deep emotions, as if he had finally found the woman he loved most? No, don't overthink it. I was just a plaything. He must be chasing me because I took his things. With this thought, I honestly opened my phone and contacted my friend. "Do you know what's been going on with Henry?" I asked. My friend was quite surprised. "Didn't you forbid me from mentioning anything about him to you?" I felt a bit embarrassed. "I'm just suddenly curious." My friend was silent for a few minutes. "Actually, for the past 3 years I've been debating whether or not to tell you." Reading her message, I felt a pang of anxiety. After making up her mind, she sent me a long message. "After you left, Henry searched the world for you. He even contacted our old school teachers to ask about you. Given his state, I'd say he had feelings for you." I found it hard to believe. After reading her message, I was silent for a few minutes before taking a deep breath. When I left, I almost emptied his house. He must be fixated on that. Even I found this reason flimsy, let alone my friend. Henry comes from a wealthy family and has achieved success on his own. Would he really care about you emptying his house? I stared at her message for a long time, unable to find words to reply, so I played dead. Our relationship was unequal from the start. He couldn't possibly have the same feelings for me as he would for a regular girlfriend. He had someone else in his heart. When his Moonlight returned, didn't he rush to pick her up? My friend had nothing to say and just sent, "I think there might be a misunderstanding. You should think it over." Although I agreed with my friend verbally, I didn't really dwell on it. After all, in my heart, a canary is just a canary. Never to dream of things that don't belong to it. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I suddenly felt a pang of conscience. Honestly, if I hadn't met Henry, my life might have been a mess. In my frustration, I recalled someone once saying to pass on love. Since I had received support back then and now had some success, I should pass on the love and help those in need. After some thought, I decided to sponsor a government initiative and also look for underprivileged students at schools to support. After making this decision, my conscience felt much better, and at least I could sleep without any more insomnia. After a thorough selection process, I finally decided on a charity elementary school to support. To truly help those in need, I naturally had to conduct an on-site inspection. When I arrived at the charity school, I found a banner at the entrance thanking the benefactors. The entire school was engaged in a small-scale cleanup, clearly taking this event very seriously. I felt quite embarrassed, as I had agreed with the principal to keep everything low-key when selecting students to sponsor. So why was there a banner? The whole setup was overwhelming. I tidied up my appearance before getting out of the car, expecting a warm welcome. But to my surprise, the area in front of me was empty. On the other side, there was a stark contrast. I looked toward the direction of the cheers and walked over, intending to make a comment. As I entered the crowd, I heard a group of students discussing, "Why does principal have time to visit our school today? Ever since he invested in this school, he's been so busy. Isn't it nice that he took time to see us today? He's so handsome, both good-looking and kind-hearted. It's hard to find such a man. I wonder if he has a girlfriend." Listening to the students praise him to the skies, I was even more curious to see who this big shot was that caused such a stir at the charity school. To my shock, as I squeezed into the crowd, I was stunned to see it was Henry. My mind went blank for a few seconds, and I buried my head, not daring to look up. Memories of our past interactions flooded my mind. Meeting him at the auction was one thing, but now even the charity school belonged to him. I planned to quietly slip away from the crowd, just like last time, and make a smooth escape. Initially, everything was going smoothly, but just as I was about to succeed, the crowd thickened. In my haste to leave, I seemed to step on something. The next second, a petite girl in a long dress lost her balance and fell. As she fell, she instinctively grabbed the classmate next to her, and because of my small mistake, a whole group of them tumbled down. My almost successful escape was abruptly exposed right in front of Henry. Instinctively, I wanted to run, but the next second, I was lifted like a chick. "Ethan, where do you think you're going?" Henry's angry face stared at me. I sniffed and smiled sweetly. What a coincidence, Henry. His face was dark, and at this moment, a few teachers wisely led the students away. After everyone else left, it was just the two of us. Henry's eyes were red as he looked at me. I wasn't sure if it was an illusion, but I seemed to see tears in his eyes. "You've been gone so long, don't you have anything to say to me?" I strategically coughed to ease the awkwardness, but he suddenly said, "Do you know how I've been living these past few years since you left? Whenever I see someone who looks even slightly like you, I go crazy and rush out. Every night, I have this illusion that you might come back. Ethan, is it fun for you to play with me like this?" His words seemed to mean that he had been thinking about me all these years, right? I hope I didn't misunderstand. Seeing his emotions becoming more agitated, I said shakily, "Actually, I think you should move on. After all, you now have a woman who truly suits you by your side. Although I consider myself quite excellent, Losing me, this canary, is indeed a pity. But I can't bring myself to ruin someone else's relationship. His brow furrowed even more. A woman who truly suits me? He looked at me steadily, his gaze dark and intense, completely different from the gentle look he had 3 years ago. What do you think a woman who truly suits me looks like? Like your Moonlight. Is it really appropriate for her to ask someone who used to be her canary such a question? More importantly, what's with this little grudge tone? Did you fake all the happiness and feelings when you were with me, which is why you left without a word? How could that be possible? Henry, whether in appearance or temperament, perfectly matched my aesthetic. And he was wealthy, importantly, willing to spend on me. Any woman with a bit of sense would fall for a man like him. How could my happiness and feelings during that time be fake? But even if they weren't fake, so what? I knew better than anyone the vast distance between Henry and me. How could someone as high and mighty as him like someone as lowly as me? Keeping me around was just for fun. Henry, all the feelings I had when I was with you were real, but so what? The past is the past. You deserve someone who truly suits you and matches you. This is just an excuse. I seemed to sense the tremor in her words. Someone as high and mighty as her shouldn't break down emotionally over the departure of a canary. I looked up at her red eyes. The tears shimmering in his eyes were such a stark contrast to his usual demeanor that, for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. To alleviate my own sense of wrongdoing, I decided to take the initiative. As a canary by your side, now that the real woman of your heart has returned, should I really cling to you and wait to be cast aside? As I spoke, Henry simply stood there quietly watching me. The real woman of your heart? His innocent tone only fueled my frustration, and I raised my voice. That's right. Don't think I don't know. The day I left was the exact day your Moonlight returned to the country. So back then, you thought, the woman I truly love is back, and that's why you let me go. In other words, you were jealous. His voice carried a hint of cautious anger as he responded, You've misunderstood. Though I wasn't sure how he had twisted the situation in his mind, I remained resolute. As a canary about to be abandoned, the wisest choice was to leave on my own terms. Or did he think I was too foolish to figure this out? I sighed. Henry, I was wrong to sell your family's belongings back then. But since you already have someone else by your side, just let me go. Ethan, you've misunderstood, he said, his voice trembling. There's no such thing as Moonlight. From the very beginning, when I approached you, it was because I genuinely wanted to be with you. Please believe me. Let's not separate, okay? Hearing the tremor in his voice, I almost softened and nodded in agreement. But just then, a bespectacled teacher rushed over to us in a panic. Principal, a student has had a sudden seizure. We've administered emergency care and called an ambulance. Do you want to go check on them? Hearing that a student was in danger, Henry's first reaction was naturally one of urgency. He was about to step away but suddenly turned back to look at me. His gaze was filled with deep emotion. Wait here for me. I'll be right back. Henry's current state was clearly that of someone trying to keep one person at home while maintaining another outside. Do I look like someone who would agree to that? Don't go anywhere, okay? His voice even carried a hint of pleading. But since it was a matter of life and death, after a brief hesitation, Henry followed the teacher and left. Watching their figures disappear from view, I pressed my lips together. After a moment of hesitation, I turned and walked away. Truthfully, when Henry asked me not to separate from him, there was a fleeting moment when I shamefully wavered. Thankfully, reason pulled me back just in time. After all, I've been living like a pariah lately. Every time I step out, I seem to run into Henry, and it's given me a psychological shadow. Judging by his behavior, he's still hung up on the past and even wants me to return to his side, despite clearly being involved with someone else. Since I can't figure out Henry's true intentions, I've been avoiding going out and have been in a slump. After careful thought, I decided to channel all my emotions into work. No matter what, money is the only thing that can give a woman true security. My top priority now is to focus on making money. I threw myself wholeheartedly into my work. In my line of investment, it's usually enough to operate behind the scenes. But in my view, investment isn't just about the industry itself, it's about the people behind it. Only ambitious and reliable leaders can make my investments more secure. So, before making any final decisions, I always meet with my potential investment partners. Before heading out, I dressed inconspicuously, even donning a large mask. This time, the collaboration was with a slightly chubby middle-aged man who looked honest and straightforward. He handed me some documents. "Miss Ethan, here's an overview of the company's performance for the first half of the year." I skimmed through the documents and nodded. "I have confidence in your project. Since we're going to collaborate, I naturally hope for a long-term partnership. I trust your company won't disappoint me." Of course," the man said, nodding repeatedly. Just as I thought everything was settled, he suddenly added, "Actually, there's another investor interested in this project. He's also a young and capable individual. Would you like to meet him?" Since someone else shared my interest in this project, I naturally agreed. A familiar voice reached my ears as a tall figure approached. Seeing Henry standing before me, I froze. Once I gathered myself, my tone turned cold. "Since we didn't settle things last time, let's resolve everything now. Dragging this out any longer isn't good for either of us." I exhaled deeply. "I was wrong to sell your belongings back then. Tell me how you want me to make it up to you, and I'll do my best to comply. But given that you already have someone else in your life, asking me to come back to you is impossible. I may have once been your canary, but I have my limits. I won't be the other woman." Once I had said everything on my mind, I finally felt a weight lift off my chest. Hearing my words, Henry's brows furrowed tighter and tighter. 3 years ago, when Luna returned to the country, yes, I went to meet her. But I went as her friend. We were part of a larger group, and there was nothing private between us. After spending time together, you said you were a canary. Have you ever seen anyone bare their soul to a canary? Have you ever seen anyone stay loyal to a canary from beginning to end? When she finally spoke, I was indeed a bit dazed. The rumor about Luna being her Moonlight was something I had only heard from others without any concrete proof. Besides, ever since I came into Henry's life, I hadn't noticed any other women around her. The way she treated me was so extraordinarily good that I used to think it was because I was obedient enough. But now that I think about it, with her wealth and status, what kind of obedient woman couldn't she find? And even though I left 3 years ago, she still couldn't forget me. I looked up at her and said, "I'm not a canary." She gazed at me quietly. "Ethan, I like you, truly from the bottom of my heart. It's precisely because I like you that I kept you by my side. So, can we go back to how things were before?" Henry's eyes burned with intensity, filled with longing. Against my better judgment, I nodded. On the way back, she held my hand tightly, as if afraid I might suddenly run away. When we returned to the villa, I was surprised to find that it had been perfectly restored to how it looked when we used to live there together. Even the butterfly orchid I had once kept in the corner was recreated flawlessly. At that moment, a pang of emotion surged in my heart. It seemed I had misunderstood this proud and aloof woman back then. Keeping me by her side was truly from the heart. As night fell, the atmosphere grew awkward. After all, it had been years since we were alone together. I hesitated before cautiously saying, "It's getting late. Maybe I should." Before I could finish, her Adam's apple bobbed, and her deep eyes darkened further. "Ethan, you already promised not to leave me. Where else would you go?" Her expression turned cold, and her every move unsettled me. I fidgeted for a long time before finally speaking again. But just as I uttered a single word, she suddenly leaned in, her hand cradling the back of my head as her fiery kiss overwhelmed me. It wasn't until I was gasping for air that she hoarsely said, "Ethan, you left me hanging for 3 years. It's time to make it up to me." I clung to her shirt just to stay upright. "Calm down," I pleaded. Her gaze grew even darker. "I can't calm down anymore." What followed was a blur of breathless moments, her intensity swallowing every sound I made. Over time, I seemed to return to the pampered, carefree life I once had. The difference now was that I no longer had to tiptoe around her, pretending to fit her every preference. Instead, I could finally be myself. And to my surprise, even when I was completely myself, her affection and care for me never wavered. One day, as I lounged lazily on the couch leaning against her chest, I munched on chips and mumbled, "We spend all our time glued to each other like this. What if something happens?" She replied naturally, "If it happens, we'll deal with it." I instinctively responded, "A child changes everything. A family changes everything." Though it was a perfectly normal conversation, the air between us grew inexplicably charged. She lowered her gaze, watching me intently. "You need to believe me. From the moment I chose to be with you, it was always about you, and only you." I smiled knowingly. In the past, when I said things like this to Henry, it was often to test her. But I never imagined that one day, those hypothetical words would become reality. Staring at the 2 bright lines on the pregnancy test, my mind went blank. For a long time, I just stared at it. Eventually, I hid the test, deciding to find the right time to tell Henry. But before I could, Rachel, the housekeeper, rushed in and reported, "Miss Luna is here to visit you and Ethan." Hearing Luna's name, a wave of unease washed over me. Even though Henry had clearly explained her relationship with Luna before, the thought of facing her now still filled me with anxiety. Henry, on the other hand, remained calm. "Let her in," she said indifferently. As soon as she spoke, a crisp voice rang out. "Henry, long time no see." I mustered my courage and looked up at Luna. She wore a beige blouse paired with light-wash jeans, exuding youthful energy and elegance. Most importantly, she was stunning. So much so that even I, as a woman, couldn't help but take a second look. "Hello, I'm Zoe," a soft male voice said. At the same time, Luna affectionately wrapped her arm around the man beside her. "This is my boyfriend. I brought him along to meet you both." The affection between them was unmistakable, visible to the naked eye. Hearing this, I smiled politely, maintaining a calm exterior while feeling a heavy weight lift from my chest. So, she had a boyfriend. Even after Luna's introduction, Henry showed no reaction, merely responding with a lukewarm, Luna walked over to me and suddenly teased, "She's so cold, like a soldier. What do you even see in her?" I hadn't expected her to approach me directly. After a moment of surprise, I nodded in agreement. "In some ways, she is a bit stiff." Luna nodded, then gave me a friendly smile. When our mutual friend found out you two got back together, they were genuinely happy for you. Although I don't know why you broke up in the first place, over the years, we've all seen how much he cares about you. Considering how long he's liked you, he even went so far as to do charity work just to get closer to you, and specifically chose to sponsor you at your school. Maybe you could give him another chance. As his good friend, I can honestly say I've never seen him show interest in any other woman. I listened quietly as Luna spoke, and only then did I realize how much I had misunderstood him all these years. At the same time, I learned something earth-shattering. Henry had liked me for a very long time. Luna, as if she had accidentally revealed a forbidden secret, covered her mouth in shock. "You didn't know?" I nodded emphatically, signaling that I was very interested in hearing more. Luna immediately got into a gossiping mood, eager to share everything with me. But just then, a stern voice interrupted us. "We're quite busy today. You can come back another time." Luna gave me a pitiful look, but under Henry's imposing presence, She had no choice but to leave with her boyfriend. Frustrated that I didn't get the answers I wanted, I walked over to Henry and confronted him. What did Luna mean when she said you've liked me for a long time? The man gave me a meaningful smile. The whole world knows that I, Henry, genuinely like Ethan. Everyone except Ethan, apparently. I couldn't wait any longer and started shaking his arm. When exactly did you start liking me? I was so curious. From what I could remember, apart from the time he started sponsoring me, Henry and I hadn't had much interaction. He reached out, tapped the tip of my nose, and said, "In time, you'll find out." Blushing, I pulled out a crumpled tissue from my pocket, one I had been nervously fidgeting with. "Well, don't regret it later." Seeing what was in my hand, he froze. Even someone as composed as Henry couldn't help but pull me into a tight embrace at that moment. "Ethan, I'm going to be a dad." Seeing how genuinely happy he was, I couldn't help but feel a wave of happiness myself. "So, can you tell me now, when did you start liking me?" Henry knelt down on one knee in front of me, pressing his ear gently to my stomach. A moment later, he looked up at me and repeated with a smirk, "In time, you'll find out." I couldn't believe it. "I don't buy it. I'll get it out of you eventually."